Yes, I use recycled tires to create the sculptures that I build. Well, let's get a little history on how that came about. Have relatives that sew, so as a young person growing up creatively, sewing and cooking was the things that I saw. Once I left home, I left family, friends, home, and also a state in order to get to where I am at this time. When I first started with the clothing, I began to take apart the pieces that were already created and deconstruct them and began to reconstruct them into different wearable pieces. This was my sort of start in recycling of materials. When I graduated from Rutgers, from my undergraduate degree in sociology, I had a friend who actually handed me a coiled ceramic pot that had lots of glazes sort of gooped on it, and somehow when I touched this particular gift, it sort of got me going, continuing in the direction where I am at this time. I was very interested in doing public art work and large scale. My interests continued to be very peaked when I went to graduate school. And then initially I thought I was going to work in metal fabrication, but then by the time I got to school, everyone had retired. So my consideration for the recycled material came about again. My first introduction to the tire was back in the 80s, back in New York, where there was a lot of retreads all on the streets. I used to take these items and start off making wearable pieces and then into sculpture. There was lots of car fires in New York at that time as well. So I would wait until the cars would cool down, and then I would scrape off the materials, and then again would go back to what was first nature, which was to create wearable pieces, and then into sculpture. The automobile tire is extremely infinite as far as the possibilities, and its only limitation is that of your own imagination. But the material itself had brought about some initial ideas about race, also about the architecture and design, which I then in turn began to utilize the surfaces to create the works that you'll see also today. Recycling has been a part of my work for, I guess, since its beginning. And the materials that we throw away a lot of the time can be utilized a lot in different works of art, and also into, as we see today, a lot of materials are turning green. So I think it's a very good start for where we are. This particular piece is called "It's So Hard to Be Green." And again, utilizing the discarded tires to create the works. This was one of my first larger works that was done for the Whitney Museum. And again, I think that when one begins to go off in their life, I think what I ended up doing was the recycling of not only the materials that I use, but also in myself. I get up every day and I sculpt myself. And this is also a part of that sort of identity of making sure that I am aware of my direction in the works that I'm doing, and then also in the preservation of the work. This piece is called "Conversion." And in some of the works, using the tire elements, I'm looking at the inside, which at times can be very supple, where it feels very organic, it feels very skin-like. So I utilize the material to sort of evoke different ideas in the work. Oops. This is manipulating fractions, which again, just the textures. Initially, when I began to create the works, my history brought me back into the wearable art pieces. I also went into interning and working with ceramics, and the textures that I'm using in the tire works can be reflected in the compositions of just thinking in terms of how clothing and cooking is done in small pieces that then put together can make larger works of art. And also the textures, like this one here, reminds me of some of the ceramic pieces that I did early on as well. This piece is called Serendipity. This is called Takeout. Some of the information as far as the titles of the work, again, just thinking in terms of my daily life, the communication as far as what I go through in a day. I think that my voice, as far as my thoughts about the work, all came through the sort of structure of creating art and creating in this fashion of smaller ideas being able to be developed into larger ones. This is called Gridlock. And again, the textures and movements are evoking a certain kind of parallel toward life and daily life and also into art. This is Feelings Unkept. This one is called Hala. This is One Way. This is the Conversationalist. The works themselves vary in the textures. Again, they kind of remind me from my start as far as into sewing through ceramics. I also worked in basket making, and I think the interwoven sort of similarities in the types of materials and the types of forms began to be provoked and shown through the art itself. This one is called, let's see, Crossover Effects. This is called The Tooth Fairy. And this is Fatality of Hope. My thoughts on, at times when I create the works, they're usually different types of armatures made out of different materials, and a lot of times, again, utilizing the discarded materials in order to create the forms. These forms begin to describe the different elements organically that you see in nature. Also, just in terms of just of one's thoughts. And so, thank you very much.